Tunisia's former president, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali, died on Thursday in Saudi Arabia, where he'd been living in exile. His family confirmed the news, citing his poor health over the past few weeks, which saw him admitted to hospital in the Saudi city of Jeddah, where he passed away. Zine El Abidine Ben Ali was the first leader to be toppled by the Arab Spring revolts. He ruled Tunisia for 23 years before fleeing to Saudi Arabia in early 2011 after mass protests erupted against his rule. In June 2011, the 83-year-old leader was sentenced in absentia to misappropriating public funds and ordering the torture of army officials. He was sentenced to life also in absentia in 2012 over the killing of protesters in the 2011 revolution. A separate court also sentenced him for 20 years for inciting violence and murder. His death comes just a few days after Tunisia held the second free presidential elections since he was ousted.
Swept away by the Arab Spring in 2011, former Tunisian President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali died yesterday after an illness. And according to several observers, Ben Ali had less positive than negative impact on his country. Indeed, his first years in power were marked by progress, particularly in the economic sector and in the status of women. But when it came to making a way for a successor, Ben Ali quickly threw on the coat of a dictator.
Well, we speak about this with Hanan Bis, an investigative journalist in Tunisia. Hanan, thank you very much for joining us in the program today. How do you feel about the death of the former leader, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali?
President Ben Ali dies a few days after the announcement of results of the first round of presidential elections, which actually quite shocked the political scene in the country, since they gave rise to two characters who were anti-system somewhere, one of whom is in prison and the other quite completely out of the political scene. So at a time when Tunisians are still digesting this news of the death of the former president arrives. It appeared to be happening at a crucial moment when we were beginning to believe was the fall of the old political system. So it seemed this death was somewhat finalizing the fall of the old regime. So how are Tunisians reacting to this news, Hanan? Reactions are a little mixed, since there are people who regret the loss of Ben Ali, those who try to make a little distinction by saying that he was nevertheless a statesman who did things for Tunisia, but who slipped at the end of his mandate before being dislodged from the presidency thanks to a revolution. Well, to another set of Tunisians, death did him well, since, according to them, he had already died politically. So his physical death was actually the end they expected. There were also politicians who regretted his death and tried to settle a little bit, since before his death there was a lot of debate about whether to bury him in Tunisia or maybe to leave him in Saudi Arabia. So this was quite important news, but it was not as important as we thought, since people are more connected to the second round of the elections, to the future of Tunisia in the next 5 years, especially since we already have a legislative campaign that has begun. We have a second round of the presidential election that is coming up as well. So there are some things that attract Tunisian audiences more than the death of the former dictator.
And Hanan, what should we remember during his 23 years in office?
C'est-à-dire pendant les 10 premières années de son règne, il y a eu réellement.
During the first 10 years of his reign, there was real economic boom. We had a GDP of 5%. He was a man who went to the Palatine, who often managed to improve people's lives in disadvantaged areas. A statesman who was nevertheless able to promote sectors such as health, education, and the economy.
Comme la santé, l'éducation, l'économie. Il a renforcé les acquis de la femme tunisienne.
He strengthened the achievements of Tunisian women. So, in the first 10 years of his rule, he had a more or less positive balance sheet. It was actually only after that, when he himself started to get sick, to lose his abilities, and his family, especially his wife, took center stage in politics with his family, and then he started talking about corruption, saying the presidential family that was monopolizing all sectors. And that's when we really started to see signs of social injustice, poverty, youth unemployment that were increasing, and that's what began preparing the ground for the 2011 revolution.
Qui a préparé un peu le terrain pour la révolution de 2011.
Hanan, we have to leave it at that, but thank you very much for giving us all these details. Hanan Bis, an investigative journalist, speaking to us from Tunis in Tunisia.